Today we are going to do a case study on this 2001 Audi A6 Quattro. It's got a 2.8 liter 30 valve V6 in it, and it has a coolant leak. And a customer said that when the vehicle is shut off, it leaks coolant out, and I've checked the reservoir, it's empty. I drove it, I shut it off, it never leaked for me. We're going to fill it back up and try it again. Instead, I figured let's get it up on this 2-post lift. You can't see much from the top because the way they put these engines in here, so we're going to lift it up, look from the bottom, see if we can't see where it's leaking from, and go from there. My guess is, since it's 155,000 miles on this vehicle, and the timing belt was done at 80,000 miles, it's probably going to be like a water pump, especially since it only leaks when you shut it off. That's usually when water pumps leak out the weep hole. So that's my initial guess. If it is a water pump, we're going to go ahead and do the timing belt with it and show you how to synchronize all that. As you can see, you can't see much from the top of this engine. I did remove this plastic cover here. I'm going to have to remove the ones for the timing belt so you can see the water pump, but as you can see that the coolant reservoir is completely empty, and I see absolutely no traces of a leak from the very top. So here's a view underneath this vehicle. You can see that the oil pan has coolant that is ran down from the front of it to the back of it. And I look around the back and it's completely dry. And I look up top and you can't see a whole lot. So it's looking like we're going to have to pull this front bumper off and see where we're at. So I'm going to start by pulling the front wheel off and gaining access to the inner fender well. So there's a few screws you have to take out for the inner fender well. And then you can get to like the headlight washers and the three nuts that are on the inside. However, if you remove the headlight first, you can get to the 3 nuts that hold the bumper to the fender well a lot easier. So here I remove that little cover up front, and I'm going to zap the bolts out that connect the bumper to the frame. And you have to do that on each side. Now I'll remove the Torx from up top and disconnect any hoses and any wires that are connected by the radiator. So your cooling fans and your upper radiator hose, that's all got to get disconnected so that this whole front shell can swing out. So here I'm taking the headlight out with those 3 bolts and disconnecting the wires. Careful not to break those clips so that the headlight maintains contact. So here's the very front. You can see that up top where I'm putting my hands there. There's like 2 bolts on each side. There's the nuts on the inner fender well where I was at right there. And then the whole thing should swivel out. Just take your time, make sure that you don't break anything. And then when you swivel that thing out or pull it out, you know, have something to set it on. So I have a 5-gallon bucket sitting there. I'm going to pull it out and set it on. And basically that's going to be your access to do the timing belt. So I'll move the camera over so that you can see how open it is, and it's actually really nice. So here's a close-up view of the water pump, and you can see the orange at the bottom. It's leaking out the bottom of the water pump. It's either the soft core plug or else it's actually the gasket. Okay, so this is the timing belt region. You have your crankshaft right here. You have your tensioner and your tensioner pulley. This is your water pump, which is leaking down below. You have another idler pulley, and then you have your right camshaft and your left camshaft. In order to line this all up, you put the harmonic balancer on and get it to top dead center. And then you can remove a bolt and put a crank holding tool in there, which I don't have. You also put a camshaft tool across here to hold these cams in, which I don't have. So what I've done is I've marked the cam to the housing right here and right here. And then I've taken this straight edge and I've marked a line across here just to ensure that I'm close. So once that's all marked, you got to make sure that your camshaft, those bigger holes actually face the inner part of the engine. So now we're going to go ahead and remove the tensioner, and we want to use this Allen head, and you're basically just going to compress that tensioner down nice and slow. And when it gets all the way compressed, you're going to take a punch or a pin or a pick or something that's going to actually slide in there to hold that tensioner in place. And once you can get that slid into there, then all the belt tension will be off. So now we'll go ahead, all the tension's off, we'll go ahead and remove the belt. I always start out with cams or whatever's actually going to move the easiest. It depends on, how much tension's on it. You may have to use a standard screwdriver to slide the belt off, or you might even have to turn the cams into each other a little bit to take some of the tension off. Just be aware that if you do move the cams, they can rotate about a quarter of a turn and move off of its lobe. And that's really common. So if it does that, it's not a big deal. Just get a wrench on it and turn it back and line it back up right away so that you don't forget about it. And see, I'm having a hard time getting it off the crankshaft, so I'm just using a standard screwdriver and being really gentle and just slowly prying it off. Sorry about the camera view and staring at the back of my head the entire time, but I don't have a film crew. It's just me and a camera. So I almost got the belt off. There we go. So now it's time to remove the tensioner and get it off. So that's off. I always get a new tensioner. They're about $80 from any of the parts stores, but you want to replace that. You want to replace all the idlers, the water pump, and the timing belt all together. Never cheap shot it. So now I'm taking off the pulley part of it. And now here's the idler pulley. And then to get the last bolt out of the water pump, I've already removed some of them. I got to take this pulley off. So remove this pulley and get that last water pump bolt out. And I didn't show all my removal just because I want to cut down the time on this video. So, and typically I use a small impact gun, battery operated, but I didn't want to look for it, so I just used my ratchet today. So here's the water pump and it's off. And after inspecting it, I found out what was wrong with it.
So as you can see on this water pump, this soft plug looks like what was leaking. And it was coming straight down through here and out. It was nice and dirty there.
So you got to make sure that you clean all the surfaces good, get all that antifreeze off, and then it comes with a gasket, but I always use blue RTV on each side of the gasket, and I don't use a lot, just a thin layer to ensure that it adheres well. But it's very crucial that you don't have any of the coolant or water or anything like that on it. It's got to be nice and dry. And then you're going to put all the bolts in finger tight, and then always take an extension and then tighten them up by hand so that it seats perfectly, because you don't want to start on one side and just start torquing the water pump all the way around. So I ensured that they were all the same tightness, and then go ahead and torque the water pump down to spec. Now when I torque anything down, I make sure that I go from one side to the other and either use a star pattern or something to where when you tighten it down, it's going to go the same from each side. You don't torque one side down and then the rest. Now I'm going to install the tensioner, and it has a pin in it. Do not remove that pin until you're ready to set the belt. And that should be torqued as well to the settings, because you are going into aluminum. It's very easy to strip it out.
So this is the timing kit. You got your belt. You got one tensioner here. Belt.
And you have your other pulley as well. So now I'm going to put the other pulley on and go ahead and torque it down to spec. And it should move pretty freely. I'm going to put this other pulley on and I'll torque the other pulley on and I'll torque that one down to spec. And then it's basically time to start routing your belt around. I always start by putting it around the crankshaft, and then go on the non-tensioned side. And so the right side of the screen does not have a tensioner, so that's non-tensioned. And so I'm going to make sure that that's as tight as I can possibly get it without moving the cams out of sync, and work my way all the way around to where the tensioner's at. And some belts will have a lot of play to them, and some won't hardly have any play. In the case of this 2.8 liter, there was very, very little play, and you had to have everything pretty much right on the money in order for it to slip on. As you can see, I'm really trying to feather that belt onto the left cam, and it looks like I finally got it. And then just double check to make sure that your cams are in the right spot, your crank's in the right spot, and that the belt is perfectly seated on every pulley. And once you're 100% satisfied with it, go ahead and pull the pin out of the tensioner, and now you are set. So Audi has a spec to set the tension on the belt So you'll put it on the idler and you'll essentially just torque it down so that you take all the slack out of the belt. One thing I like to do on all timing belts is I rotate the engine around one full time. And that's just for peace of mind, to make sure that a piston's not going to hit a valve, that I don't have anything messed up. And when I rotate it all the way around, it'll take any slack away that is there, and I'll make sure that my crank and both cams line up perfectly like they did before. So there's obviously a lot of different ways that you can do the timing belt. The proper tools from Audi would be the best way, but since we didn't have them, that is one way that you can get by. Thank you for watching. This is from the Billings Career Center. Find out more at bccautomotive.org or check out our YouTube page.